Thank you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for our 36th episode this week, where we'll be recapping last Sunday's game versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, going through our 3-up, 3-down, and discussing news around the NFL. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pats 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day, as well as at our website at pats300levelpod.com. So, Kevin, pretty good, at least final outcome this past Sunday. Patriots winning 17-14. Wasn't the prettiest game, but I think we kind of had a feeling about that going into it. Two teams that struggled on offense first week, but had some pretty good defensive play, and that's kind of what conspired again this week. What was your overall thoughts and takeaways?
Yeah, I think it wasn't the most prettiest game, the most offensive, dominating game by really either folks. And you could really see that going into the game. We knew that Mitch Trubisky isn't the greatest quarterback in the world. We know that the Patriots offense is starting to try and find its kind of footing here. Plus, the Steelers defense is really good. They've got a probably one of the best front sevens in the NFL, even with losing TJ Watt. And they also have someone that knows them intensely as a defensive specialist in Brian Flores. And he can really do anything to try and stop them. But I think this was a kind of a foot in the right direction. The offensive line looked really good in this game, especially at the end. They kind of really found the identity. They bullied them at the end. They had the ball with, was it 4 or 6 minutes left, and they didn't give the ball up after that.
I think it was like 6:48 or something along those lines.
So they kind of really imposed their will on them, which is really what they need to kind of show that they're tough running football team, that eventually they're going to be able to open up the pass and have everything work, but it's going to take a little bit of time. So it's only, again, game 2, and this is kind of something you expect out of a Patriots team. They find a way to win on the road, which is really all that matters here.
Yep. No, I agree completely. A win's a win, especially considering the first 4 games of the season where you lost week 1 versus Miami, and then knowing that next week you have a tough test in Baltimore, the week after in Green Bay. So those are 4 pretty tough games to start the season. And I know the Steelers, they did make the playoffs last year, but they're not considered one of the stronger teams. So this was as much of a must win as you can get in a week 2, which granted it's week 2, so doesn't really say much, but it was important to come out, get a win in a hostile environment, and they did that on the road. Granted, they got a couple gifts here and there, but overall, there were some positives shown in this game. So just to, I guess, go next, what was your thoughts of Mitch Trubisky, how they played him defensively, his just play overall? I know that when they played the Bears, when Trubisky was quarterback back in, I believe, 2018 or 2019, they had some trouble. They still won the game, but they were a yard short of him completing a Hail Mary to either win the game or take it to overtime. So they had some troubles with him then. It didn't seem like they did this week, but what was your overall thoughts?
Yeah, I think my overall thoughts are really what I thought going into the game. Mitch Trubisky is not really a good quarterback at all. He has the arm strength. He has the speed to be a pretty good quarterback, but I don't think his decision-making is that great. And I don't think his accuracy is always that great. And he showed it in this game. The Patriots played him really well, a lot better than that Bears game. And I think part of that is just with the overall team that they have on defense. Matt Judon was really well at not over pursuing a lot of the times. And even just the rest of the team, they didn't really over pursue, and the linebacking core is a lot faster than before. Dietrich Wise played a really good game. So I think between how the Patriots defense played them versus how he is overall, I don't really think he's that scary of a quarterback to go against, and he really showed that there. And I think the defense played well, but also it's kind of really tough to say, was it really the defense playing well, or was it him just being bad? And I think it was kind of a combination of the two, but they've had 2 good games in a row now against kind of 2 mediocre quarterbacks. So it'll be interesting to see the next 2 games to see what they do against the Ravens and what they do against the Packers going forward.
Yep. And then just one quick thing I just want to hone in on is I was actually a little intrigued coming into the year how Trubisky was going to be, because he didn't have a great career with the Bears, but also his coach was Matt Nagy. So I wasn't sure how much it was Nagy, how much it was Trubisky, if it was a combination of both. And then he sat out last year behind Josh Allen, and who had, You also had Ken Dorsey as a quarterback coach and Brian Daboll as an offensive coordinator. So I was interested to see coming to Steelers where he has some actually pretty good weapons. Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Pickens, and then Fairmouth. I was interested to see if maybe this could help elevate his game to where he could be, but at least through 2 weeks, it doesn't seem like that's the case. It seems like he's just a mediocre quarterback.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of the things what he does is that he has one read. If he doesn't see it, then he takes that check down. There were a numerous amount of times where they had a matchup of Claypool on
Miles Bryant,
and he could have hit him 100% of the time just because of that size difference. Miles Bryant, I think, is 5'8", and Claypool 6'4". So it's a huge size advantage. And we saw that against the Broncos years ago when Alfonso Dennard was lined up against, I can't remember.
Demaryius Thomas.
Yep. And it was a huge height difference. And he was playing him perfectly. It's just he didn't have the height to make up for it. And that was the same kind of situation yesterday. And I don't think they targeted him enough. And I don't know if it's something where he just wasn't seeing things or they just weren't kind of honing in on it or having the right route combinations. But they could have really targeted that a lot more.
Yep. No, I agree.
Going on, Patriots play calling. This has been a big kind of story offseason last game. And we both said last game it wasn't as big of an issue as some of the media were pointing out. How do you think that they did play calling this game?
I think it was similar. Like, again, I didn't think it was too big of an issue. There are a couple things that I was a little surprised about why they didn't go a certain way. Where one thing is I thought they'd be running the ball a lot, especially early on, because last year Steelers had the worst run defense in the NFL. And then they have a really good pass rush. So a way to slow down the pass rush is you keep running the ball. And we didn't really see that much up until the last drive. They only ran the ball 16 times compared to 34 passes. So I thought that was something where they'd be able to get an advantage, and they didn't. And then we saw in that last drive, the Patriots were able to just run the ball down their throats. Part of it could have just been the Steelers defense being gassed by then, but part of it could have also just been that was a matchup that you could have exploited. So that was one of my only real major quirks with the play calling. But other than that, it seemed like traditional Patriots play calling. And I think that's more matchup wise, where going into it, they had that same thing where last year against the Chargers had the worst run defense and you expected them to run the ball, and they just went out trying to throw it deep. And the Chargers had really good defensive backs where they might have just saw something on film and it might have been the same thing with this. But that was, again, just my only real negative with the play calling.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was not an issue in this game. I don't think last week was, and I don't think it's going to be an issue going forward. Yeah. Again, it's not going to be perfect every single week. No one's perfect. Josh McDaniel had questionable calls.
Yep.
He's had them this year. He had them in the past. He's always going to have them. Bill O'Brien's always going to have them. Everyone's always going to have them. So no one's going to be completely perfect. And I think they did a pretty good job here. One kind of questionable thing that I would say going forward, and is this it's not really a play calling, but it's really the offensive coordinator kind of situation. Maybe it comes down from Bill, but I don't like really how much they use Parker in the games, and we'll probably get into him in a little bit. But I think it would be better off for them if they use a little bit more Bourne, and like we were saying before, just because he has that speed, he has the ability to get off the line really quick, and whenever he's in there, he does make plays. And it could be a lot of the times they won't play a receiver if he's making mistakes in practice, if a lot of mental things. And maybe that's what's happening behind the scenes that we're seeing. And maybe he's just not grasping some of the concepts that they want, or maybe the blocking, or there's got to be a reason why he's not in there. It's not a talent reason. It's either a comprehension of the scheme or something. But even if he doesn't get the scheme completely, if you put him out there, he's going to get open and they're going to be able to hit him. So that's just one thing where I think they need to use Parker for what he is. He's not a dominant number one wide receiver where he has to be out there all the time. He's really that matchup play where you need to kind of go for him over the top of someone, or if you can get that matchup where maybe he's on a shorter cornerback or they put him on a safety or a linebacker, that sort of situation. But I don't think he's really that number one receiver where he needs to be out there all the time.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think since you have a lot of good depth at wide receiver, it makes more sense where, unless there's a specific matchup, one specific game, it makes more sense to kind of play them more.
Cycle.
Yeah, exactly. Just one last thing on play calling before we move on. One thing I noticed this game, which I didn't really notice the first game, is after every single offensive drive, As soon as Mac came off the field, you saw Bill Belichick talking with Mac, Joe Judge, Brian Hoyer on the bench after every single time. So I think that's just more showing that the offense is still Bill's offense, where before he had Josh McDaniels, so he didn't have to worry about that. But since he doesn't have that, it's more him relaying to Mac, relaying to the offense essentially what was going on that last series and what his view is of what to do going forward.
Yep. And then one thing I'd like to add before we move on too, Billy Yates in this game, he was on the sideline the entire game, where the last game and throughout the preseason, he had spent the first half up in the coach's box, the second half down on the field. And this gave, I think, Matt Patricia a little bit more kind of wiggle room where he didn't have to really focus on the offensive line and focus on play calling and focus on being like an offensive coordinator. So I think that helped. And I think you could kind of see that with the offensive line in this game, at least. Yeah. It's either a coincidence or it did have some play in that where it did help having a coach actually specialize and be there for them right at that moment.
Yeah, no, that's a great catch and great point.
Yep. And then kind of moving on to that Patriots offensive line, I think they played a really good game, despite what some people have said for how they looked. And also some of the pressure numbers, I think, can be a little bit deceiving, where they did get a lot of pressure, but the pressure wasn't an in your face at this within 1 to 2 seconds where you have to get rid of it. I think Mac played really well. And this is one of the few things I think he did well in this game, where he moved around for the pressure really well. He moved in the pocket well enough, and he wasn't getting hit really. So I think that was something where they did allow pressure. You're going to allow pressure to a group like this. They're one of the best defensive fronts in the league, but they didn't allow pressure within 1 to 2 seconds where it would break down a whole play.
Yeah.
So I think that they played really well in this game.
No, I agree. I think this exceeded my expectations of what to expect for this game, just considering how good the Steelers' defensive front seven is, with Brian Flores as a linebacker coach, along with just even without TJ Watt, all the men that they have in their front seven, and they got 3 hits and 0 sacks. And one of the hits was, again, I forgot who, I think it was Stevenson was blocking and he just either didn't get his man or he let him get by him. And that was one of the hits, but the offensive lineman only allowed 2 quarterback hits. So even in the run game, they were good. It wasn't perfect, but both Harris and Stevenson Harris averaged 4.7 yards per carry. Stevenson averaged 5.2. And then Cole Strange had an amazing game. Andrews and Onwenu, again, were great. Trent Brown had a much improved week this week than last week. So overall, the O-line is great. And if they play like this throughout the season, they're going to have a good shot.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that they played, and again, I think I mentioned this, great games. Cole Strange has had 2 great games in a row.
Yes.
And he looks like he's going to be kind of the real deal.
Yeah, I agree.
Moving on, Aguilar and Myers had a really good game between the two of them. Myers has shown that he's that dependable when you got to have it player for Mac Jones. And we saw it last year, and he holds on to the ball whenever he has to do it. And then Aguilar kind of had that breakout game where we've been kind of expecting to see over the last year and a quarter now with him, where this is kind of what they did see in him. He brings a lot of speed, and I think what really helps him, and that's the one thing with Parker that I think does benefit Aguilar, is that he doesn't have to be the top guy or the really the one that the defense has to hone in on all the time. Yeah. And I think they can use his speed a lot more, where they can do those crossing routes. They can do those goes like last year. I think Mac's a little bit more comfortable this year. And then Myers is those underneath routes, any of the gotta have it thing. So I think they played a really complementary style between the two of them there.
No, I agree. This is the game that I've been waiting for Aguilar, and I had a feeling that this was really going to be coming, where I don't think he's going to be getting 100 yards every single game. But I think throughout training camp and preseason, everyone was saying that he was the best wide receiver in the Patriots. And I think it's showing that he feels more comfortable in this offense. Him and Mac are more on the same page, and he has that speed where he can get by people. Also, since you do have Parker, and if you have Parker, Myers, Bourne, and him, sorry, I was thinking who's the fourth person, but it was Aguilar. That's one less person that the defense can really try and be forced to take away. Whereas last year, I think part of the reason why he wasn't as productive is since he was really the only speed guy at going deep, they had help over the top there, or it was forcing the Patriots to look elsewhere because he was covered. But now, since you have an additional guy, it might allow him to get open more too. So those are a couple of things to just focus on. But I thought he had a great game. Like you said, Myers was the Jacoby Myers we've seen the last 3 years, where you need a first down, you need a big catch, you throw it his way, chances are he's not going to drop it. He's going to find a way to get open, hold on to the ball, even if he gets killed.
100%. Moving on to the defense, like we said, we kind of covered it in the beginning. They played really well. Was it them playing really well? It was a combination of Trubisky. Was it just Trubisky's terrible? Really tough to tell. We'll get a better picture of it in the next couple of weeks. But the third down defense is actually something that was a little bit alarming, where it was something that we did see last year, and we saw it again this time, where the amount of third downs and third and longs that they ended up giving up was a little disturbing here. And hopefully it's not the same trend. Maybe part of the reason I think with this game is that we saw a lot of the defensive play with them is that they really tried not to just give the big play. They want everything kind of underneath it because they don't really expect Trubisky to make really any plays. And we see this sometimes with quarterbacks that Bill doesn't have any faith in, is that he just doesn't want to give up a big play and he'll assume they're going to make a mistake underneath. And maybe that's just them playing soft and hoping he was going to make a mistake and hoping that saying you can't go 80 yards every single time and not make a mistake. And maybe that's the reason why this happened. And maybe it's not as big of a concern. But what do you think there?
No, I agree. Especially in the beginning, it was concerning where they were Steelers were 7 of 9 on third down to start the game, including 2. I think one was 3rd and 11, one was 3rd and 17 or something like 17. That. And they still allowed it to convert. But the encouraging thing is, even though they started 7 of 9, they only finished 8 of 15, where they were 1 of 6 on their last 6 third downs. Granted, one of them was for a touchdown, I believe, on 3rd and goal from the 4-yard line. But overall, it was a little discouraging at first. And that's something that you definitely have to make sure you correct going forward, because especially the next 2 weeks of the teams you're playing with, Ravens and Packers, if you don't get stops on third down where you need to, it's going to be tough to win. So, and we'll have to see. Like, one of my just concerns in the beginning of, or last week's game was just at the end, there were a couple of times on that last drive where they weren't able to get off the field. And that was their biggest issue last year. So we'll have to see. I'm not too concerned right now, but we'll see if my mind changes over the next couple of weeks.
Yep, couldn't agree more. Moving on, 3 up, 3 down. I think
you missed one person.
Did
I? Mac Jones.
Mac Jones, yes. So I don't know how I forget about him. It's something we talk about every single week.
Yes.
So how about you go first?
Okay, I'll start. Like you said, he was good in the pocket. I think that was the best part of his game this Sunday was being able to avoid pressure in the pocket, being able to step up, step to the side. And that's something that for a second year even last year, as a first year quarterback, I was very impressed with that. His ability to feel pressure in the pocket and step up or step to the side. That's something that Brady, even though he's not mobile, he's mobile in the pocket, and that's one of his strengths. Not saying Mac is at that level, but just through a year and 2 games, he's very good at that. And that's something that he's a quarterback beyond his years in that aspect of the game. Having said that, I think this was Mac's worst game as a Patriot. His decision-making was very questionable. There were plays where he threw it to the wrong receiver when there were other receivers open. There were some balls where the Aguilar touchdown, for instance, hell of a catch by Aguilar, which ended up being a touchdown and a big reason why he won this game. But that wasn't a good throw by Mac Jones. That should have been an interception. And if it wasn't for Aguilar making a great play, they wanted to score it, and it would probably be Pittsburgh going the other way. And who knows if you win the game if that's the case. So a lot of questionable decisions, but he did enough to win the game. Not every quarterback's going to have a great game every single week. We saw Brady have some horrendous games sometimes where he had no touchdowns and 4 interceptions, for instance. So every quarterback has a bad game. You're in a hostile environment. You're going up against a defensive-minded coach. And Flores, even though he's not the DC, he probably had a lot of input on the game. So I think that probably contributed to it too. But overall, he did enough to win 21 of 35, 250 yards passing and a TD with that one interception.
Yep, I think we kind of agree here too. A lot of agreeing today. So again, I don't think he played that well. There's a lot of decisions that he made that weren't great. But the big thing is they came in with a win. One thing I think that will be interesting to kind of see what happens this year. We always talk about that second year leap with Mac, and is he going to take it? How is he going to look? Some of the reports out there too is that Mac in his first year, and of course, any kind of quarterback coming into the league needs a lot of coaching, and he spent a lot of time with Josh. It seems like this year they're kind of not having as much kind of hand holding with a lot of the stuff. So that might be just something where they want to kind of see how he develops. It's something that he can, they're leaving it kind of out there. And a lot of the times when you kind of learn the best is when you're really thrown into the fire, you have to do something on your own. Maybe they're seeing, is he going to reach up to that challenge? Is he going to develop? And if he doesn't, they'll step in and kind of hold him a little bit more and more afterwards. But this may be something they're trying to kind of train him to see if he can learn it and kind of step up like a pro rather than being just a second year quarterback. So that could be something why the struggles the last couple of weeks, and it'll be interesting to see how he kind of takes the next couple steps forward, the next maybe 2 to 4 games.
Yep. And one thing I just have to say on that is one observation is it kind of looks like he's like pressing or kind of forcing the issue when he doesn't need to. And I wonder if it's just him still trying to get comfortable in the offense for this season, along with what the new plays and some of the new players, along with that first week where the offensive line wasn't great, if he was kind of anticipating pressure, anticipating the blitz when it wasn't there, and then kind of coming into this game, the same thing with the good front seven. So if he was this was not only his worst decision making, but it was also the least accurate I've ever seen Mac, and he's someone that's really known for his accuracy. So again, that can happen if you're forcing it. You end up throwing it a little too short. So hopefully that's just something that can be corrected going forward.
Agreed. All right, now we're moving on. 3 up, 3 down. Real quick here. I think we have pretty similar options. I think for everyone. So, how about you go first? We'll just go opposites.
Yeah, I'll go. Number 1 is the offensive line. Cole Strange was just incredible going up against Hayward. That was his name, right? Cam.
Yeah, Cam Hayward.
Cam Hayward. I don't know why I was blanking, but there were several plays where he was going up directly against Cam Hayward, and he just held his own. Hayward's the best or second best defensive tackle in the NFL outside of Aaron Donald. Owenu had an incredible game. Andrews was good. Trent Brown looked like the old Trent Brown. Isaiah Wynn was pretty good. So overall, 3 hits and 0 sacks against a front seven that is the best in football and completely decimated the defending AFC champion Bengals. You couldn't ask for anything better from the offensive line.
Yep, I had them as well. So I think we're gonna have the same ones for everyone. So I don't really think there's much to add. We talked about nauseam in the beginning of the episode, and all the points make a lot of sense. Next one, Aguilar and Myers combined, just because it's kind of tough to say which one is better. They had a pretty similar instance there. Aguilar had that one awesome catch, plus a lot of the other kind of minor catches as well. And then Myers was that safety blanket, really caught anything that needed to be caught when it was thrown to him. There's a couple of throws where they could have gone to Myers, and he kind of forced it to other people. So could have had a couple more catches, a couple more yards in that scenario.
Yep. No, I had both of them as my number 2 as well. Aguilar, 6 catches, 110 yards and a touchdown. Myers, 9 catches, 95 yards. Aguilar's 100+ yard receiving game is the first 100-yard receiving game by a Patriot since Jacoby Myers in 2020 when Cam Newton was quarterback. So it's been a little bit. Myers almost had 100 this game too. So they both had great games. Myers, every single time he needed a catch, went to him. He caught it. Then one thing with Aguilar, which with his speed, and I think you can get more out of going forward, is if you have several on the outside doing go routes and he's on the middle, you can do those crossers where, since he's fast enough, he can either, if it's man, he can run by the guy, or if it's zone, he can slip through the zone and you can get some yards from him too. And that's something they did a little bit this week, and I'm hoping that they can do a little more going forward.
Yep, I agree. I think that's something I mentioned before, and something I like kind of seeing out of him for that. Last up, first time I think I've ever had him in my app before, and last week He was on the buffer for, and you had him
Yep.
as an up last week, 2 weeks in a row, and let's see, maybe he can continue the streak. Dietrich Wise.
Yeah.
I think he played really well in this game. He's had a really good year this year, and it could be some of the kind of the defensive fronts they're playing, how they're kind of using him. But he looks a lot more comfortable. He's adding pressure. He doesn't over pursue the quarterback when he has to. So I think he's had a really good year so far and a really good game. This game.
I agree. I've been very impressed with Dietrich Wise. He's been my most improved through 2 games. Mm-hmm. And he's been one of probably the best defender on the team so far through 2 games, which is incredible to say. He's just a physical force on the edge. He's able to rush the quarterback, get pressure, but not over pursue. And he's very smart when he's been playing. And he's been playing. I think part of it is just they've been playing some different front sevens and putting him in a better position to succeed and use his skill sets to his advantage. Where sometimes if it's 3-4, like a traditional 3-4, it's not more to his advantage. He's playing in a position that's not the best for him.
Yep.
So I think he's been just very good this year, and hopefully it's just something that continues, because if he's able to sustain this, they're going to have a good front seven with Judon on the other side. You have Christian Barmore rushing up the middle. You get a quality back this week, and you have some linebackers with Jennings and Uche as well. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, agree. Moving on, three down. I'll start with my first, and we had a couple different ones here. Yeah. So I had Parker as my first. Like I said, he hasn't really done much the last 2 games. He's had 4 targets, 1 catch, and 2 interceptions when targeted those times. So he hasn't really done much. And I think that's something we've also talked about in the preseason podcast, where I think he was the worst wide receiver in the league at getting separation last year. And that's something we've kind of seen this year too. And he's really for those jump balls, those 50-50 kind of over the top throws. And I don't think that's something he needs to be on the field 75-100% of the time. So I think that, number one, I think his usage needs to go down a little bit. They need to know when to use him and put him in scenarios that are beneficial for him. And the other thing is, when he's on the field, he needs to find a way to get open. He needs to catch the ball. There's a reason why there's been 2 interceptions. Number one, I think Mac forced a couple times, but 2, he's got to win those routes and those catches. So
the interception this week, though, part of it is he might have not read it as great, but it also wasn't a great throw by Mac, where Fitzpatrick was on the outside and he was able to run over it. But if Mac threw a better ball, it might have been something that he'd been able to catch. So I think I blame that a little more on Mac, but it was also a good play by Fitzpatrick.
All right. Who's your first?
So my number 1 was Mac. I don't have too much more to add, but he just wasn't sharp. He had some very inaccurate balls, and then also not great decisions at times. And he did enough to win, but that's something that he's going to have to improve going forward.
Yep. I also had Mac, so I won't go talking too much there. Who's your number 2?
My number 2 is Hunter Henry. And even just through the first 2 games in general, he's been a big disappointment. I don't know if he has a catch yet, or if he does, it's
I think he has 1 catch.
One. There was some, I think he was targeted. I remember 1 target where he was doing a out cut and he was just too slow again. And that's something that was his biggest issue last year, where he's too slow to turn his head around, and he hasn't, he's not on the field too much in blocking, and he just has to get on the same page more with Mac. Last year, he was at least in the red zone, but so far he just seems too slow, and he hasn't been as productive or contributing as much as you would expect him to.
Yep, that's for my number 3. I had both tight ends really in general. I don't think neither of them really did anything this game, and you're paying them a combined $25 million a year to be on the team. And this time, I get why both of them weren't out at the same time, because they ran a lot of 11 personnel instead of having 2 tight ends. They had 1 tight end, 1 running back. So it makes sense why they both weren't on the field at the same time. But when you are on the field, you have to do something. And neither of them really did anything. And that one Hunter Henry play drove me nuts, because this is something we've talked about a lot last year. We talked about it, I think, even last game, or
we talked the preseason season preview episode.
The season preview when we're giving who are kind of most valuable players, all that sort of stuff. And he just doesn't get his head around on those short, either in cuts, out cuts, any of those short sort of situations where he has to kind of make a kind of a jiggle move.
Yeah.
He doesn't turn his head around, and he doesn't expect the ball to be coming in. He has to know where the yardage is, how many yards he needs to get, when Mac's going to throw it. And he's just not there. And that needs to change, and it needs to change soon, because a problem he's been doing for over a year now.
Yep. 100%. The only thing I would say about Jonnu though is, or just tight ends in general, is I feel like this week the matchup didn't fit them as well to be targeting the tight ends. So I agree that they need to get more production out of them, but I think this week it was more just the specific matchup itself.
All right, who's your last one?
My last one is Miles Bryant. He was okay in coverage. I know he allowed a lot of catches to Claypool, either when it was zone or just because of the size mismatch, but also one horrendous punt return attempt where he was going back sideways 10, 15 yards and he touched the ball at the 1 yard line, and he's lucky that he didn't have possession for it, or else it would have been a safety and the Steelers getting the ball back. And then there's another punt return later in the game where it was just another bad decision. And that's something where if you're getting on the field, especially as a punt returner for a team that values special teams as much as the Patriots do, you can't be making those decisions. If you're going to field the ball, you have to make sure it's the right decision. And especially you can't field the ball or attempt to field the ball and you not get it, or you touch it and you let it go by and the other team get it. So that's something where it was 2 bad punt returns. And then if it happened, I personally wanted to put him back at punt returning. I would have put Peppers or someone else. But again, for next week, I would do the same thing. But if you don't, you have to put him on a very short leash.
Yep. I completely agree. Too many mistakes, special teams, and then just his corner is getting beat. Part of it not his fault because of his size, but again, moving on really quick here. News around the NFL. First of all, one of my favorite things to talk about, even though I've sworn him off, I've come back to him. Trey Lance out for the season after his second game. And who do you know? Jimmy Garoppolo comes in, takes the reins, leads them to victory, looks really well in this game. And it's I think not really too much to explain about this, but just funny how everything kind of works out.
Yeah. And obviously you never want to see an injury to a player, especially that severe for a young quarterback. So you don't want Jimmy to have to, or Jimmy coming back because of that. I would have preferred if it was because Trey Lance just wasn't playing well, but since he's getting that shot, I think this is his last real chance to prove it, that if he gets hurt again, if he gets 3 different injuries or he's just inconsistent, no team's really going to want him. I think we saw this offseason where some teams were interested. They were interested as having him as a backup, but partially because of his contract, but also because I think his injury situation too is that for a quarterback that took his team to two conference championships in the last 3 years, you would think that you'd have a lot of people lined up to get him. But it's just, he's good when he plays. He's not great, but he's good enough. But is he able to really show that he can be that guy, that he's not a little bitch, as Martellus Bennett says?
We'll find out this year. Next kind of big storyline, late game endings, 2 weeks in a row, some great games. I still need to sign up for Red Zone. I don't have it yet. And it'd be nice to but a lot of these where you actually got to catch them because the timing worked out perfect for all these. But Bengals, Raiders, Browns, Ravens, all last minute victories. Well, they all lost, but last minute losses. Last minute losses for these teams. Bengals screwed me because I had in my survivor pool. I'm out for the year now. Raiders fumble. Browns somehow I'm giving up 13 points in a minute 47 seconds to the Jets. And then
that Browns one, yes, I know people are going after Chubb for scoring the touchdown, but because the Browns had first down with a minute 43 left or minute 40 something left, and the Jets had 0 timeouts. You need the ball. There's no, if you're going to run a play, you don't say run it and then go down. if you have no timeouts anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't blame Chubb for that at all. I blame Stefanski for not kneeing the ball. That's one of the most. I know we blame Hackett for his decision last week. This is another one that's just right up there where.
Oh yeah, I don't think either of us
zero
think
sense.
Stefanski's a good coach. So
no, he's not.
Yeah.
And then also just another late minute game too is even the Rams, they were up 28-3 and they almost blew it. Falcons almost came back. The Rams ended up winning 31-25, but the Falcons had the ball at the end of the game and could have beaten them there too.
Yep. They had in the 20-yard line, there was a last interception by Ramsey that ended up sealing the deal, but they could have easily scored there, and it could have knocked a whole bunch of other people out of survivor pools. So last thing, just Bengals and Raiders, really two kind of surprising teams going 0-2. It'll be interesting to see what happens going forward for the year. Last year, there wasn't a single team that started 0-2 that actually made the playoffs. So
that stat's a little skewed because the Patriots started 1-3 and 2-4 and made it. Granted, they played the Jets week 2, but so you can't put too much in it. It's still early on. But in the AFC, that's as competitive as it's going to be this year. They're putting themselves in a tougher hole.
Yep, completely agree. All right. So thank you everyone for listening to the podcast. And again, check us out at Pat's 300 Level Pod on Instagram, Twitter, at Pat's 300 Level Pod.com for our blog. And we'll have some more things up there throughout the weeks.
And we're going to be coming up. Just stay tuned later this week for our preview for this upcoming game versus the Baltimore Ravens.
Yep. That should be out on Thursday afternoon around 12 o'clock. We'll have that drop. And subscribe, rate, review. Look forward to talking to you next time.